Valerie's story. This isn't like Caleb. He always tells me where he is and when he'll be home. We didn't have any plans for the evening, but I'm starting to get worried. I poured myself a large glass of rum and cola, turned on the TV, and waited. There were no reports of anything unusual on the news. About every half hour, I tried calling his cell phone. It still went to voicemail. When I woke up at 5 a.m., I saw that the TV was still on and ran to the garage. Only my car was there. I was overcome with panic. I ran upstairs and looked in his closet. Everything was in its place. He hadn't left. Hoping, but knowing it didn't matter, I called the police and explained what was bothering me. "Lady, he's drunk and didn't come home. Pull yourself together. Call us tomorrow at the same time if he's still not back." It was difficult to get ready for work. When your partner is missing, your heart won't let you think clearly. My name is Valerie Mancino. I married Caleb when I was 22. I graduated from college and got married within 2 weeks. Caleb is 3 years older than me. When we met, he was a senior, and I was a freshman. We weren't a couple until my senior year. I enjoyed my sexual freedom and know that Caleb charmed many girls. It took me a long time to mature and realize that Caleb would be very successful. I would have been foolish not to accept his love and make him my life partner. As far as I know, Caleb has been faithful to me. I can't say the same about myself. I work for a secret government organization. Access to our facility is only possible by the will of God and with the permission of his mother. The idea that a private investigator could obtain compromising evidence is simply ridiculous. Knowing this, I realized that a romance that never left the facility was low risk. I have no reason to cheat. It's exciting, it's dirty, it's fun. No one gets hurt. It was just sex, nothing more, nothing less. I didn't do anything with Doug that I didn't do with Caleb. The feelings were real. I know Caleb woke up several times because of it. I firmly believe that Caleb couldn't have known what I did. He would have left me without hesitation. Since he didn't take anything, I believe he's about to walk through the door. I tried calling Caleb all day. Nothing changed. I was in emotional shock. Please be safe. The drive home was a nightmare. The shortest route along the coast was blocked. It took me almost 30 minutes longer to get to my garage. Caleb's car wasn't there. I sat in my car and cried. Please be alive. To avoid being ridiculed again, I decided to wait until morning to call the police and report Caleb missing. The main news story of the day was why the road was closed. A car had flown through the barrier and fallen into the ocean. The water gets deep quickly at that point, but the car was found. The TV was showing a live broadcast of workers pulling the car out. It was lying on its hood and covered with seaweed. Around 7 p.m., the doorbell rang. I was still sitting in the living room watching the news. When I looked out the window and saw 2 patrol officers, tears streamed down my cheeks. "Mrs. Mancino, we found the car registered to you and Caleb Mancino. Is he home?" "Number, he didn't come home last night. I called the police this morning and they told me to wait until tomorrow morning to report him missing. His car was pulled out of the ocean last night. The body has not been found. Divers will return tomorrow and continue the search." I sank to my knees, hugged myself, and cried. "When will the search begin?" "You'll have to check with my supervisor. Can I ask you a few questions?" "If it will help find Caleb, go ahead. Can you tell me where you've been since yesterday?" I was offended. They were treating me like a suspect. I answered their questions, but I was furious. "Listen, Mrs. Mancino, until we find out the truth, everyone is a suspect. In most cases like this, the spouse is involved. Are you and Mr. Mancino currently having marital problems?" "No." "Calm down, Mrs. Mancino. Do you know anyone who might want to harm Mr. Mancino? An ex-boyfriend? One of his co-workers? One of your co-workers?" God, I hope they didn't notice me flinch when they mentioned my job. "No, no one." "Do you know if he has any sexual interests other than you?" "No, I doubt he's that kind of person." "Do you have any sexual interests other than Mr. Mancino?" Definitely not. Are you done because I seem to have said everything? We can stop there. Do you have any travel plans? Not until Christmas. Why? I'm trying to find answers to questions that are bound to come up. Thank you for your time, Mrs. Mancino. After a long wait on the line, I learned that the divers would resume their search at 8 a.m. I got up early and was there at 7 a.m. Part of the fence had been cut off. It looked like it had been gone for a while. There were signs that repairs had begun. It would have been terrible if Caleb had lost control where the fence used to be. It was the longest day of my life. Every time a diver surfaced, I prayed he hadn't found anything. I left for home when the divers called off the search. They said they had searched all the likely places. I didn't give up hope that Caleb was waiting for me at home, but he wasn't there. Friends and relatives gathered at our house. They brought food. There were tears and hugs. Conspiracy theories emerged. Was he even in the car? If not, was he kidnapped? Our estate is estimated to be worth millions of dollars. Considering all our real estate, it's hard to determine the exact size of our fortune. I'm sure Caleb's stock options were worth a lot, too. Over the next 2 weeks, I spoke to the detective in charge of the case every day. He could only give me minor details. Caleb's cell phone was found in the car. His passport had not been used. There were no electronic traces. His credit and debit cards had not been used. His trail had gone cold. The house was eerily quiet. I refused to believe that Caleb was dead. The kidnapper should have called by now. What would I do without him? I cried a lot. Doug, the man I was having an affair with, was now insisting on seeing me more often. You don't need to keep this inside, Valerie. It's too soon, Doug. I need time. I can't accept that he's gone. How about dinner? Just a shoulder to cry on. Dinner, alcohol, and dancing helped distract me from my dark thoughts. Doug and I continued to see each other once a week. Our goodbyes went from kisses on the cheek to light caresses. 4 months had passed since Caleb disappeared. I tried to contact our lawyer, but I was told that he was busy with several large projects and couldn't represent me at the moment. After several phone calls, I found a woman who agreed to take my case. Linda was a beautiful blonde who acted like my grandmother. 7 months have passed. In a year, I will be able to file for divorce and get half of the property. The rest will go into a trust fund in Caleb's name. Once he is declared dead, the property will be distributed according to his will. Most of it will go to me. The police had already sorted everything out, and I had been questioned several times. I was innocent, and my version of events hadn't changed. 9 months passed, and I came to terms with being a widow. After dinner with Doug, we went back to my place and had sex. It was difficult for me to enjoy it because of my mixed feelings, but still, it had been many months without sex, and it was nice. A week later, we met again. Caleb is irreplaceable. Doug is just a body. He likes it, but I'm left unsatisfied. He doesn't care. The police hadn't bothered me for the last 6 months. Detective Oseo was standing at my door again. Detective, please come in. Mrs. Mancino, when I first interviewed you, you said you had no sexual attraction to anyone other than Mr. Mancino. Do you remember saying that? I turned pale. What did they know? Should I ask for a lawyer to be present during the interview? Detective, my lawyer advised me to have her present at all future meetings. Let me give her a call. Linda spoke briefly with the detective. Valerie, you told me you're innocent. I don't see anything wrong with answering this question. The detective continued. You said you don't feel sexually attracted to anyone other than Mr. Mancino. Do you remember saying that? Yes. Does the name Doug Blessant mean anything to you? I glanced at Linda. She nodded to the detective. Yes, we work together. He placed photos on the table showing Doug and me having sex. Does your job include entering room 309 and having sex with Mr. Blessant? My stomach twisted. I was sweating. We had sex. So you lied. Yes, but I have nothing to do with Caleb's disappearance. To me, that's just another lie. Did you and Mr. Blessant conspire to harm Mr. Mancino? Linda intervened. The interview is over. Let's go, Valerie. We need to talk. The conversation wasn't going well for me. I repeated my story over and over again. All the details remained the same. I was innocent, and my story hadn't changed. Linda suggested that maybe Doug had taken matters into his own hands. I think anything was possible. Where did those photos come from? Who else knows? This is bad. Caleb won't understand that it doesn't mean anything. I was ashamed of myself for thinking it was good that he died and didn't have to deal with this. Caleb's story. My name is Caleb Mancino. I've been married to Valerie for 8 years. We want children, but decided to wait. Now that will never happen. After college, I was very successful very quickly. Within 2 years, my startup company went public. A year later, we were bought by a group of venture capitalists. I'm still actively involved in the company, but I traded some of the speculative potential for immediate wealth. Thanks to the new management that came with the new money, the value of my shares skyrocketed. I can retire whenever I want. When it came time to get married, a prenuptial agreement was a must. Valerie, who was in love and had no malicious intentions, happily signed it. We talked at length about fidelity. The prenuptial agreement stipulates very harsh penalties in the event of infidelity. My sexual needs are minimal. I have absolutely no need or desire for anyone but Valerie. I thought I could say the same about her. When I received an email with innocent photos of Valerie and a man named Doug Blessant disappearing for unplanned meetings, my blood boiled. I agreed to meet with the courier who had an envelope with $500 to get the full set of photos, paying for my broken heart. How painful. There were several photos of them having sex. All of them were inadmissible in court. I needed my own evidence. Valerie works in the government complex, which prevented me from obtaining the necessary evidence of her infidelity. I had to find out how the lovers could have sex outside of work. After thinking through all the details, I got down to business. One night, on my way home, I noticed that there was an 80-foot section of fence missing from the coastal road. I turned the semi-trailer around, and the fence broke. No one was hurt. It was risky, but I felt I could survive a 6-meter fall into the water. I waited until the traffic on the road had died down. Shortly before 9 in the evening, I drove perfectly into the gap. Opening the driver's door window, I braced myself for the impact. Fortunately, I was wearing a bicycle helmet. I hit my head hard on impact. I unbuckled my seatbelt and got out of the car before it sank. No matter how well you plan something, when you do it for the first time, there's always a moment when you think you've overestimated your abilities. I started to worry that I had killed myself. I thought I would float up in 10 seconds. 30 seconds passed, and I panicked. When I surfaced, I slowly swam downstream along the coast for about a mile. As I swam under the second bridge, which was my intended exit point, I began to rejoice in my success. I swam to the dock on my back and then climbed onto the pier. It took me at least an hour to calm down and find the strength to continue. My aunt, a Christian with a cynical view of cheaters, agreed to hide me in her home. I walked for about 2 hours before knocking on her door. I didn't leave her house for more than 9 months. I assumed that Valerie would file for divorce in a year, citing my departure. Over the years, I had saved about $50,000 in cash. If I stuck to my budget, I could survive. No one at work would notice me, as I was a nominal manager. If my plan didn't work, I would have to quickly come up with an alternative. Don't ask me how, but after a few payments, tracking apps were installed on Valerie and Doug's cell phones. All I had to do was wait for them to be in the same place. Over time, they started meeting weekly. This made my detective's job easier. I let him know when the lovers were together, and he organized surveillance. I spent my $50,000 at a reasonable pace. I spent my days writing stories, reading similar books, and monitoring the lovers' phones. After several months of surveillance, I wasn't sure my plan would work. Reading the detective's weekly reports, I realized that the situation was escalating. I doubt we'll get anything useful when they first have sex outside of work. Hopefully, they've gotten used to a certain place and will return there to do it again. 281 days after my accident, I got what I needed. Doug and Valerie spent the night having sex at my house. After the first time, my detective installed a listening device in the bedroom. It was my house and my cameras, so all the recordings were admissible in court. Before disappearing, I warned my lawyer, Alex Harkins, that I might be away for a while. He agreed to represent only me in any family matters. As soon as I had the evidence, I contacted Alex. He filed for divorce. To make things a little more difficult for Valerie, Alex sent copies of the original photos to the police with a printed note identifying the names and locations of these people. We also spread the word that my life was in danger because of this couple of fortune hunters. Coming out of hiding, I realized that I was facing some legal consequences. Alex said they would be minor since I hadn't done anything illegal. Most likely, I would have to pay for the car repairs. The city might require me to reimburse law enforcement for the time spent searching for me. Overall, it was a drop in the bucket. The first thing I did when I returned to society was to go talk to the police. We met in a conference room at a hotel a few miles from my home. I spent 5 hours answering questions. After I was released, I was interviewed by journalists. The interview was broadcast live on the evening news. There was no reason to talk to Valerie. I had long since gotten over my anger. She was nothing to me now. Settle the legal issues and move on. Valerie, there was a car outside my house. I noticed a well-dressed woman sitting in the driver's seat. She was clearly waiting for me. Mrs. Mancino? Yes. How can I help you? You have been served with a subpoena. Have a nice day. Damn. Someone sued me? I threw the document on the kitchen table and poured myself a drink. I turned on the TV and stared at the screen in horror. This is John Edwards. With me in the studio today from an unknown location is Caleb Mancino. Mr. Mancino disappeared about 10 months ago and has now reappeared. Welcome, Caleb. Thanks, John. I'm not quite back yet. Until my divorce is final, I'll be in hiding. If I'm found dead, my prenuptial agreement won't take effect, and my fickle, vengeful wife will get all my property. So why did you need to go into hiding? She had an affair at work, at her government agency. Without proof, I couldn't resort to the extreme measures provided for in the prenuptial agreement. I correctly assumed that eventually the lovers would have sex outside of work. As soon as I got the proof, I started divorce proceedings. Pretty smart to protect your property. A man has to do what he has to do. Like most married men, I don't want to pay her for sleeping with other men. Did you spend several hours at the police station today? Yes, that's right. I wanted them to know that I feel threatened. I gave them copies of everything I have. Have you been charged with anything? Number. They want me to reimburse them for the cost of returning my car. Thanks for talking to us, Caleb. Back to the studio. This is John Edwards signing off. I rushed to the kitchen and tore open the envelope. It was a divorce petition. Later, I woke up on the floor, apparently having passed out. I'm leaving with nothing, and for what? For a few stolen moments of excitement, for feeling dirty, or for the cheap thrill of getting away with something, for the fact that in the end, I didn't get away with it. Caleb. After spending the evening talking to those who were once my friends, I returned home to be met with what can only be described as collective contempt. The only ones who were happy to see me were my brother and sister. Alex called and said Valerie had been served. Her lawyer, a woman neither Alex nor I knew, had called Alex and said Valerie wanted to meet. Should I go? I suspect she'll ask for counseling if you don't go. I think you'll go to counseling anyway. The judge handling your case is known for assigning several months of counseling. Let's make her wait. I hadn't been to a single court hearing. When your lawyer is completely in control of the case, you just sit and wait for the phone to ring. Clear your schedule. He scheduled 12 weeks of counseling. She filed a counterclaim for psychological abuse. I read the prenuptial agreement, and the reason for the divorce doesn't matter. If you can present legally obtained evidence of her infidelity, she loses everything. Great. How do these counseling sessions work? Find a few who will take your case. She'll do the same. You'll be able to meet her candidates. Don't be too picky. The judge may extend the sessions if the two of you can't get along long enough to even choose someone. Any recommendations? Alex gave me a few names. I really liked Shelley Summers, the second on Alex's list. When Valerie met her, she was impressed too. The meetings were to take place in the court conference room. 12 minutes remained. The first session was so banal that I wanted to laugh. Apparently, I was behaving completely irrationally, and our almost perfect marriage was now in jeopardy. The next two sessions lasted a total of 5 minutes, followed by half an hour each individually. I decided to change my approach. From now on, I would claim that I had never loved Valerie and that there was nothing to save. It was far from the truth, but it allowed me to maintain my dignity. When your wife reveals her forbidden treasures, it hurts like hell. In the fourth session, I had to speak first. Miss Summers, we are closer than ever to resolving this issue. I never loved Valerie, and attending these sessions will not change that. Let's be clear. You never loved Valerie? That's right. There's nothing to save. Valerie, do you understand? That's not true. No one could play that well. He loved me. He still loves me. I ruined everything, but we need to be together. Kyle, your response? She has sporadic memories. She can't remember everything, like part of her wedding vows, so she remembers what helps her. The rest of the hour was a test of my resolve. I passed with flying colors. Well, I think that's all for today. See you next week. Not wanting to talk to Valerie outside of court-ordered sessions, I waited until the elevator had swallowed her whole. I took the stairs down to the basement and exited through the service entrance. Valerie was fighting a hopeless battle. Shelley constantly berated her for telling me that I was wrong, that my feelings didn't matter, that she was wasting everyone's time. At the end of the 7th session, Valerie finally understood. You just don't want to be married to me, do you? Yes, that's right, not now, not ever. The last 5 sessions were canceled. Shortly thereafter, I was a free man. Valerie complied with the court order and moved out of the house, leaving her car and jewelry behind. She left a note asking for another chance. I tore up the note. Valerie and Doug were fired for good reason. Doug's wife divorced him. If I knew where he went, I would try to make his life difficult. But I have more important things to do, so that's in the past. When the holidays roll around, Valerie sends greeting cards. She never forgets to invite me to dinner or something. It's tempting, but that train has already left the station. When the book deal was signed, Valerie and I came out ahead. The book turned out to be quite racy. In the fictional sex scenes, I was portrayed as a selfish lover. It was Valerie's attempt to get back at me, but it actually backfired. Many women who have read the book now make my nights happy. Together, they teach me to think about the pleasure of others, thereby improving my skills. Some of these ladies are better than others at hiding their selfish intentions. Enjoying the pleasures they give me, I'm almost glad Valerie did what she did. Almost. But there's still a tender spot in my chest that seems like it will never heal. What are you doing with those boxes, Gordon? She noticed. One-eyed Sally noticed everything. Just trying to get through this damn door. She jumped up and held the door open for me while I struggled with the empty cardboard boxes. Tony fired me. I just needed somewhere to put my stuff. I started pulling my personal files and papers out of the drawers and throwing them into the boxes. I tried to take only what belonged to me and nothing that belonged to the company. He can't fire you. This place will fall apart without you. I didn't answer. Without waiting for me to ask, she started helping me pack up my things. She noticed when I took a photo of my wife Laura off the desk and threw it in the trash can. One-eyed Sally had been my secretary for 2 years. I would miss her. She had one glass eye that never seemed to sit right. It looked like it had a life of its own. For some reason, it often teared up, so she was always wiping it and putting drops in it. 3 years ago, Sally was in an accident. She lost her husband and her right eye. Now she was forced to work in this damp room to feed her 2 young sons, 8-year-old Brian and his younger brother Greg, who was 2. Gordon, what the hell happened? You just went home to get your glasses. He can't fire you for that. I gathered my few belongings. I only needed 1 box. Tony Monsanto and Laura were in our bed when I came home. They weren't doing anything, but they were both naked. He fired you because he caught him in bed with your wife? Not exactly. First I told him to get out of my house, and then he fired me. He didn't leave? Laura and Tony were still in our bed when I left. Tony laughed as I walked out the door. One-eyed Sally put her hand on my shoulder. She didn't say anything. I smiled and walked out of the building. Monsanto mowers would have to do without Gordon Livingston. I didn't think they'd be too upset about it. My brother Shelton wasn't home, but his wife Joyce gladly offered me the guest room. Shelton was working the early shift at the tire factory and wouldn't be back until noon. Joyce cheered me up with coffee and a warm shoulder to cry on until Shelton returned. After a quick lunch, we went to my house to pick up my things. Tony was gone, and Laura was sitting in the kitchen with a glass of wine. "What the hell are you doing home in the middle of the morning, Gordon?" I couldn't believe she asked me such a stupid question. "I was afraid Tony ran out of condoms. I just brought him another dozen." "Don't be clever. It's not that important, and it's nothing new." "What do you mean?" "Tony was going to fire you 2 years ago. He agreed to keep you on if I slept with him. I did it so you could keep your job." "You mean you've been sleeping with him for the last 2 years?" Laura looked at me with a slight smile and finished her drink. "Well, it wasn't that bad. You kept your job, and I got to spend time with Tony. Now that I've lost my job, will you stop seeing him?" "Don't be silly. Why would I do that?" I couldn't believe what she had just said, but a lot of things became clear. I looked at Shelton, and we both went to the bedroom to gather my things. There was nothing in the house I wanted to take with me, so it didn't take long. Since I wasn't very handy, there weren't many tools or power tools. The last thing I took out was my desktop computer. Laura had been sitting at the kitchen table the whole time. Somehow her glass was full again. She didn't say anything else while we were there. Laura didn't look very well. She had long hair dyed a strange black color. She looked like a goth or a witch. Her skin was olive-colored, but her face was thin, which gave her a harsh appearance. She stared straight at the wall to avoid meeting my gaze, and her lips were pressed together. I couldn't tell if she was angry at me for leaving or for catching her with her lover. It didn't matter. Shell and I stopped and had a beer to celebrate the successful completion of the move. It was a pathetic excuse to drink in the middle of the day. The house was rented out. Thank God for small things. It took about an hour to turn off all the utilities. I even got a few deposits back. Next up were the bank accounts and credit cards. I left Laura half of my savings and checking accounts. When we got home, Joyce had made a great dinner. Later that night, Shelton helped me get drunk and put me to bed. It was my first hangover in years. I wasn't counting on severance pay from Monsanto mowers, but I had enough money in my savings account to live on for a few months. Unemployment benefits were out of the question, so I had to look for another job. I decided to start by filing for divorce. That took all morning. After lunch, I went to the state employment office, hoping to find something there. "Hi, Gordon. What a surprise." One-eyed Sally was standing in front of me with a clipboard. "Did you quit?" Number I was replaced by some busty woman with long hair. I just shook my head. It was a dirty move on Tony's part. Sally had nothing to do with it, and it was unfair to fire her. What exactly happened? You were replaced by Tony's brother, Carmine, and I was replaced by Carmine's girlfriend. I left before the end of the day. I'm very sorry. How can I help? Can you give me a recommendation? We both laughed a little at that. One-eyed Sally and I sat down together and filled out mustard-colored forms with information about our previous jobs. I don't think either of us believed in the system, but we felt we had to go through the motions. Before leaving, I gave her a couple $100 and my phone number. She resisted a little, but finally took it, quietly saying, "Thank you." A single mother with 2 young sons and no job had a difficult life ahead of her. I spent the next week trying to find work in the area, but to no avail. After a desperate call from Laura saying that her utilities had been cut off, I changed my cell phone number. Simmons Farm Equipment was about 3 miles out of town. Most of the farms in the area had been sold to developers. Where corn once grew, there were now ranches. Everything about the place said that its best days were behind it. The buildings needed repairs and new signs. The parking lot was in even worse shape than the buildings. Even the windows needed cleaning. Despite its dismal appearance, this was my last chance. Earl Simmons was well over 60 and significantly overweight. He sat at the table like Santa Claus without a beard. I was dressed for an interview, so he immediately realized that I wasn't interested in buying farm equipment. If you're not buying, you must be selling. I'm not interested. Can't argue with that. I just wanted a free cup of coffee. My blunt reply was rewarded with a barely perceptible smile, and he pointed to the coffee pot in the corner. I sat down opposite the owner, picked up a styrofoam cup in greeting, and nodded. Thanks. Nice way to end a bad week. Earl Simmons looked at me in surprise. I don't know you. Are you the living good who works at Monsanto? Am I right? Livingston. I used to work at Monsanto. Now I don't work anywhere. After a short pause, he said, I never liked that Monsanto guy, or his brother for that matter. We sat there for a few minutes without saying a word, just enjoying our coffee. Are you sure you don't want to buy a combine from me? I can offer you a good price on last year's model. His eyes lit up. Maybe he was Santa Claus? I looked around the room. Outside the window, I saw a large warehouse and an even larger storage yard. It seemed that there were no goods here. The showroom was completely empty. I assumed he had sold all his merchandise due to low sales. I knew nothing about agricultural machinery, but something didn't feel right. His loud voice snapped me out of my thoughts. It seems like you're thinking about buying this place. Are you going to make me an offer? In my dreams. Simmons leaned back in his chair and smiled. 7 or 8 years ago, Monsanto was going through a rough patch. It only started to succeed after it hired you. Am I right? He was right, but I couldn't admit it. I knew what I had done for Tony, and apparently others had noticed too. I could only smile and toss my empty glass into the trash can. I was still smiling when I stood up to leave. Don't rush, Mr. Livingood. Maybe we can work something out. Livingston, Gordon Livingston. 2 hours later, Earl Simmons and I had reached an agreement. He had big plans, but he needed someone like me to make them happen. He was a thrifty man, so money was no object. I was ready and able to help him, but on one condition. I could hire my assistant. One-eyed Sally would be a happy woman. That evening, I invited Shelton and Joyce to Red Lobster. The setbacks Laura had caused us quickly faded away. I think Sally was happier than I was when I called her. When we got home, Laura was waiting for me. She spent 20 minutes trying to convince me to take her back. It seemed that Tony wasn't very interested in supporting his wife, his family, or Laura. I listened politely to all her arguments, smiled, and went into the house. I didn't say a word. The next few weeks were very stressful. The main building was made of concrete blocks. The second floor was a 3-room apartment that had been used as a storage room for the last 20 years. Earl was more than happy to let me live there for free. One-Eyed Sally helped me find a stove, refrigerator, and washing machine. Sally and I cleaned and painted the office and apartment. I hired a couple of high school students to paint all the buildings. Earl never complained about the expense. It was a lot of fun, but eventually we had to get down to business. Laura called Joyce and told her she had received the divorce papers and signed them. It was all pretty simple since we didn't have a house or kids. I had already given her half of my assets. Not much for 12 years of marriage, but it was all she deserved. One-Eyed Sally was a skinny girl with bad teeth and an artificial eye. She had dirty blonde hair and looked like she had never been to a beauty salon in her life. She clearly didn't know how to apply makeup. She always looked clean, but she needed to take better care of herself. All of this was made up for by her honey voice on the phone and her work ethic, which made me ashamed of myself. Her computer skills were outstanding, as were her accounting abilities. To me, she was the embodiment of a dream. One of the advantages of working for someone who thinks they're smarter than everyone else is that they usually aren't. At Monsanto Mowers, there was no confidentiality policy or non-disclosure agreement. Tony didn't need all that nonsense because he was the boss. Unfortunately for Tony, that also meant that Sally and I had room to maneuver. Sally sent letters to all the wholesalers we worked with and all the retailers we dealt with. She simply explained that Tony and I no longer worked for Monsanto Mowers and could not provide them with services. She was very careful to avoid offering any services. Meanwhile, I called all of Earl's acquaintances to find out who was still working. Most of the customers had gradually passed away over the years, and some had closed their businesses altogether. As for Earl, he believed that the agricultural equipment business was dead. He had no desire to revive it. I came across a Korean manufacturer looking for distributors for lawnmowers in the U.S. They weren't very complicated, but they were sturdy and inexpensive. It was the perfect product for small municipalities and school districts. After a 30-minute phone conversation, I ordered 50 units from California on consignment. We had room to store them and didn't have to put any money down. They sent a box of advertising brochures by express mail, and One-Eyed Sally got right to work. By the time the first shipment arrived, we had 6 orders. The next week, Sally started calling everyone on the mailing list. I don't know who was happier, the wholesalers or the retailers. She was just laying the groundwork, and she was good at it. We wanted to get into the residential lawn care market, but we weren't opposed to a little expansion. Several companies that manufactured rotary cultivators tried to convince Tony to sell their products, but he didn't want anything to do with it. By the end of the first week, I had already closed deals with 3 of them. 2 of them were willing to work on a consignment basis. The showroom on the first floor was ready to receive the merchandise. I didn't think it would be garden equipment, but Earl was thrilled. One-Eyed Sally surprised me by signing a contract with 2 chainsaw manufacturers. An old friend of Earl's arrived with a truck loaded with new shredders. He also agreed to sell them on consignment. In the blink of an eye, Earl had a stock of new merchandise. On Monday morning, Earl introduced me to our new salesman. He was a retiree who agreed to work exclusively on commission. He said that if he didn't sell anything, he didn't want to be paid. On his first day, he sold 3 lawn mowers and 1 shredder. Business was getting better and better. One-Eyed Sally was so busy that she asked if she could come to work on Saturday. I didn't mind, as I was planning to stay anyway. There was no school or kindergarten on the weekend, so she had to bring the boys to work with her. I've always loved children. They spent most of the day in the apartment watching TV, but I think what they enjoyed most was going with Earl to the backyard to look for groundhogs. Sally said they talked about it all the way home. A few weeks later, Sally's boys started their summer vacation. She brought them to work every day. Earl kept them busy in the yard most of the time. The business was located on Earl's old family farm, which was actually an orchard. There were old apple trees growing on the hillside, most of them dead or dying. I put a bunk bed in one of the extra rooms for the boys. I bought another one for the other room, just in case. It wasn't hard to convince Sally and the boys to stay the night. Since the nearest elementary school was highly rated, it wasn't difficult to convince Sally to move into the apartment before the new school year started. Come to think of it, I think it was her idea. How did she do that? I was rewarded for my suggestion with a little kiss. Things were looking up. One day, Tony found out where I worked. A girl named Carmina had been using the company computer to download pornography and had infected it with several viruses. Tony asked me to come and restore the system. I think he heard me laughing when I hung up the phone. He was lucky I didn't sue him for alienation and wrongful termination. Earl paid for the company's health insurance for many years, even when he had no employees. When Sally found out she now had dental insurance, she was thrilled. She started going to the dentist once a week. At first, nothing was noticeable, but with each passing week, she looked better and better. The big change came when Earl made an appointment for her to see an optometrist. It turned out that her dentures had been fitted incorrectly. After she got the right dentures, they were almost invisible. One-eyed Sally was now just Sally. For her birthday, Earl and I gave her a day at the Elizabeth Arden Beauty Salon. I had to drive her to Philadelphia. The boys and I spent the day at the zoo while their mom enjoyed being pampered. It was a wonderful time. Laura called and asked for help. Her car had been repossessed for non-payment, and her cell phone had been cut off. She had moved into a furnished studio apartment and was already behind on the rent. I gave her all the furniture from my house. I have no idea what she did with it. Tony wasn't answering her calls, and she wasn't allowed into the company building. I tried to be polite and understanding, but I explained that I couldn't help her. She didn't like that answer, but she had no other options. There was 1 week left until the divorce was final. I was counting the days. We hoped that thanks to the retailers, the business would start to grow, but it turned out to be the opposite. The first to contact us was Tornado, a lawnmower manufacturer. There were 9 retailers in the area who worked through Monsanto mowers. They were unhappy and wanted a change. 6 of them knew about our new company and recommended that Tornado contact us. By the end of the day, we were the official wholesale distributor of Tornado lawnmowers in 3 counties. We had our first real chance. The next day, my divorce was finalized. After that, things started to fall into place. One by one, wholesale and retail dealers who had previously worked with Monsanto mowers came over to us. Sally was able to hire a girl to help out in the office. A few weeks later, I happened to hear a noise coming from the equipment warehouse. 2 men got out of a pickup truck and took something out of the back. A moment later, 2 bottles of incendiary mixture flew across the yard. The pair of arsonists waited for the fireballs to ignite, then ran back to the pickup truck. But it was too late. Before they could reach the vehicle, they heard 2 shots from a shotgun, and the front tires of their pickup truck deflated like pancakes. I turned on the outside lights, and there stood Earl, laughing. 2 shadows raced down the road at lightning speed. The police had no trouble finding the owner of the truck. He couldn't wait to turn in the Monsanto brothers, who had paid him for the job. That was pretty much the end of Monsanto mowers. The few remaining customers switched to us within a week. Tony ended up in jail, but I don't know for how long. Carmine disappeared. The damage to the parking lot was superficial and covered by insurance. Earl strutted around like a peacock, delighted that his old business was thriving again. He offered advice from time to time, but always tried not to interfere. Now we had a foreman who could translate from Spanish when necessary. One of our mechanics was a graduate of the local technical college, and the other was an old fart. They complemented each other perfectly. Sally became an expert on payroll and taxes in no time. Shelton and Joyce came to visit us about once a month. It was nothing special, but it was nice to have someone to talk to. Earl had lost his wife more than 10 years ago. They had no children. We were always happy to see him when we had guests. Laura seemed to have disappeared. After Sally moved in with us, we became closer. At first, we just sat and watched TV after the boys went to bed. Sometimes we both fell asleep on the couch and woke up in each other's arms. We started kissing as if to thank each other for some small favor. Without realizing it, I started kissing her on the cheek when she left with the boys to go shopping or somewhere else. In early December, Sally told me it was time for Brian to move into his own room. I agreed, of course. That same day, she moved all her things into my room. I should have guessed. After the boys went to bed, she took me by the hand and led me to the bedroom. I was ashamed of my stupidity, but I was thrilled that she had taken the initiative. The day before Christmas, the local justice of the peace quietly married us. We didn't tell anyone, but the next day Earl saw the ring on Shelley's finger. It was a wonderful holiday. Business was booming. When spring came, Earl announced that he was moving to Florida. He had a sister who lived near Ocala and had been urging him to move there for years. I was afraid his move would cause problems, but Earl had everything under control. He transferred the real estate and the business to Sally and me. All we had to do was send him 10% of our monthly income until he died. It was an offer we couldn't refuse. He didn't need the 10% because he had accumulated considerable wealth over the years. It was more of a symbolic gesture so that we would always remember him. It wasn't necessary, but we understood. The farmhouse was much more spacious than the apartment. It took us a whole month to repaint everything before we could move in. I never understood what Earl had against painting. The week we finally moved in, Sally found out she was pregnant. Brian and Greg were as excited as I was. It was hard to imagine that just a short time ago my life had been in ruins. It's funny how things turned out. I hope the new baby has 2 eyes. It seems like I've worked my whole life to make my wife happy, and it was all a waste of time. It hurts a man deeply to realize that all his efforts and intentions were in vain. After 23 years of marriage, I now realize that I didn't know the mother of my children. She always wanted something better. No matter how hard I tried, it was never enough for her. She made me feel like a good provider, and I was always happy when I could give her something. But she always wanted more. Sharon and I got married right after school. Sharon had short, dark hair. She was beautiful and had a great figure. Until recently, our sex life was good, and I had no reason to doubt her fidelity. I started out repairing engines, and today I'm a heavy equipment mechanic. I make damn good money, at least I think so. Our first life was pretty normal. Our first house was small, and when the kids came along, we moved twice to have more space. Now both kids are out of the house. Our daughter Sarah is married, and our son John joined the Air Force. The house was now bigger than we needed, but she still didn't seem happy. My parents died in a car accident many years ago. When the kids left, Sharon said she needed something to do, and of course that's when the problems started. She got a job at a property management company. Apart from a few secretaries, there was hardly anyone else there, and her boss was Glenn Sebastian. Of course, I got to know this guy. I didn't like him, and in the end, he started an affair with my wife, even though he was married himself. At that point, I just decided to give up. Why go on? The kids were grown up, and my wife was cheating on me. I decided to make one last attempt. Sharon, now that the kids are gone, I'd like to sell the house and move to Florida. What do you think? I'll find a job there, and we'll live well under the warm Florida sun. I'll pretend I didn't hear that. She didn't even look up from her morning newspaper. Every day, our conversations became less and less polite. Of course, the problem was with me. I don't know how to communicate with people. I can't convince anyone of anything because I simply don't have the necessary language skills. Sharon put up with it because she was used to it. Glenn Sebastian was the complete opposite. He always knew what to say and how to say it. It was easy to see how he had lured my wife into his bed. I think what I'm trying to say, Sharon, is that I want to take you away from Glenn Sebastian so I can get my life back. Charlie, Glenn isn't going anywhere, and we don't have a life to go back to. I'll work, you'll work, and we're not going anywhere. End of discussion. Although I had proof of her infidelity, I never mentioned it to Sharon. She continued to live her normal life, thinking I was too stupid to understand what was going on. With $2,000 from my fishing fund, I bought a detective's report and photos of everything that had happened. Sharon was still reading the newspaper when I left for work. That day, I quit my job. When we first got married, Sharon was very cheerful. We went fishing together, and I went to a few concerts to make her happy. We did little things to make each other happy. The children made our lives more complicated, but we still found time for fun. As the children grew older, I seemed to work more and more. I think that's when we started to drift apart. I wanted to save money for retirement. Sharon wanted to enjoy life. She insisted on buying a BMW, which I didn't think we could afford. It was easier to buy her the car than to argue about it. No matter how hard I tried, I couldn't keep her from Glenn Sebastian. I loved her, but I didn't love the way she treated me. So I gave up. Seymour Schlamp, my favorite lawyer, received the next $2,000 from my boat fund. I gave him the detective's report and the photographs. I signed several documents, including a power of attorney for the real estate, and asked him to deliver the documents next Monday. Today was motel day for Sharon and Glenn. They went to the same motel, the same room, at the same time, on the same days of the week. I didn't understand what Sharon found so exciting about it. They usually checked in around 11 and checked out at 2. I still had a few hours to prepare. Sebastian Holding owned several small buildings that it rented out, but its main income came from 2 old warehouses. Glenn had bought them for a song when the previous owners refused to bring the buildings up to code. No one worked in the warehouses. They were only used to store goods and other items for various local businesses. I was sure Glenn hadn't brought them up to code either. I spent 30 minutes in each warehouse tidying things up, then headed to the bank. I emptied my savings account, checking account, and money market account. After canceling my credit cards, I took all my cash and put it in a locker at the bus station. It was time to get down to business. The plan was simple: commit mass destruction and go to jail. I couldn't see how anything could go wrong. I pulled into the Desca Motel parking lot just as fire trucks were racing down the street. 2 large warehouses were burning on the other side of town, and all the firefighters were busy putting out the fire. Sharon's BMW was parked right next to Glenn's Mercedes. I parked my F-150 in the back of the lot and took the tools for my new craft out of the trunk: a glass breaker, an aluminum baseball bat, and a pair of side cutters. Precision and timing were important. Glenn could get a call at any moment that his warehouses were on fire. I had to hurry. I lit the rag soaked in gasoline and shoved it into the gas tank of my pickup truck. I had to run for my life because seconds later, the Ford exploded. It wasn't a loud explosion like in the movies, but more of a muffled whistle. It felt strange to destroy my own pickup truck, but I didn't need it anymore. In less than a minute, I slashed the valves on all 8 tires. I took my time walking around all the cars and smashed all the windows and glass with the emergency hammer. Everything went perfectly. The only problem was that the first blow set off the alarm on Glenn's car. Before he realized what was happening, I was already attacking the BMW with a baseball bat. I started by smashing all the panels. By this time, hotel staff and several guests had gathered in the parking lot, and it seemed like everyone had a cell phone pressed to their ear. I was standing on the roof of the Mercedes when Glenn finally came out of his room, pulling up his pants. He was yelling something at me, but I couldn't make out what. I think he wanted me to stop hitting the roof of his car, but I wasn't sure. I went back to the BMW and started hitting it even harder when the police finally arrived. Fire trucks were racing around the city responding to a major fire in 2 warehouse buildings, so they had to leave my poor truck to burn to the ground. As the police put me in the car, I saw Sharon looking out the motel window. It took an hour to process me, take my fingerprints, and photograph me. The photographer was furious because I refused to wipe the grin off my face. It was nice to finally sit in the cell and relax. Since I confessed to everything that had happened at the motel, there was no need for a long court case like on TV. They mentioned the warehouses a few times. I said I didn't know anything about them, and they quickly changed the subject. I'm sure they pieced it all together later, but at that point, they didn't have good communication. Once word got around the station about what I had done and why, the situation became a little more comfortable. The next morning, Sharon brought me the bail money. There was no money in the account, so she had to borrow it from Glenn or take out a second mortgage. I was pretty sure Glenn wouldn't want to put up 10% of $400,000. I could see Sharon through the glass partition behind the reception desk. She looked very angry. I knew she knew the accounts had been emptied. My watch, wallet, shoelaces, and money were returned to me. I was afraid to go out into the lobby, so I asked one of the guards if there was another way out to avoid hostile wives. He smiled a little, led me to the fire exit, pressed the alarm button with his baton, and let me out into the back alley. Free at last, free at last. After retrieving my money from the locker, I bought a bus ticket to Chicago. I didn't know where to go, but that's where the express was headed. I had plenty of time to think as I watched the rural landscapes flash by the windows. I was in a much worse position than before, but at least I no longer had a capricious wife who humiliated me. I had enough money to live on for a couple of years, given my lifestyle, but I knew that eventually I would have to find some kind of work to keep from going crazy. I had no idea what to do about income tax and Social Security. I didn't even know how to get a driver's license, but I knew I would have to eventually. After Chicago, I took on a series of small routes that seemed to stop in every little backwater town in the Midwest. We were driving through southern South Dakota when I found a newspaper that someone had thrown out. I was bored out of my mind, so I started reading every line in the paper. When I got to the classifieds, I found that I had read the same ad 4 times. Heavy farm equipment mechanic wanted, room and board provided, salary based on experience, contact Leroy Summer. I had never heard of Mitchell, South Dakota. Even though it was late summer, it was cold. The sky was gray, and the land didn't look very inviting. It seemed like the perfect place to wallow in my misery. Fairfax Equipment Repair was located in a large building that looked like an airplane hangar. The sliding doors were large enough to accommodate the largest pieces of farm equipment. I never found out where the name came from, probably from the previous owner. There were no problems with the job. The living quarters were on the top floor of the maintenance building. They were Spartan and not at all comfortable. The pay was low for this kind of work, and accommodation meant that the room had a mini kitchen. The best part of the whole deal was my new roommate, Jorge. Jorge Toledo was born in El Paso, so he wasn't an illegal immigrant. He was a little older than me, but we were similar in build and appearance. He had long hair tied back in a ponytail and a large mustache that hung down at the ends like Pancho Villa's. I was clean-shaven with short hair and glasses. I liked Jorge from the start. Jorge worked as a plumber and mechanic and was eager to find another mechanic like me. We were the perfect team. He also had a Mazda pickup truck that I hadn't seen in years. I think they stopped making them in the 70s, but this one still ran, with over 200,000 miles on it. After a few weeks, I settled in and began to enjoy my new life. We were both poor cooks, so we spent a lot of time in restaurants, mostly fast food and cheap diners. Jorge was an alcoholic. Leroy wasn't a strict boss. We could come and go as we pleased, as long as the work got done. Leroy handled the money and customer relations, while Jorge and I just repaired broken equipment. We enjoyed going on long trips and having late-night breakfasts at roadside diners. Life was good. 4 months passed. I was returning from a delivery, and Leroy and Jorge were waiting for me in the parking lot. When I parked the truck, they were both laughing. "What's going on?" I tried to sound serious. "Well, you had a visitor today. A private investigator from Philadelphia was looking for Charlie Terrell." Leroy seemed to find it amusing. Although Jorge and I were quite close, our relationship with Leroy remained strictly professional. We all got along well, but Leroy was very careful not to get too close to his subordinates. It was easier for him to keep them in line if he kept his distance. Damn, I was afraid that would happen. Is he from my wife or the mortgage company? He didn't say, and he didn't say how he found you here. Okay, I'm going. Where is he now? Jorge started laughing, and Leroy's chuckle seemed to encourage him. Jorge was drunk again. What the hell is going on? What's so funny? Jorge couldn't hold it in. Leroy told the guy I was Charlie Terrell. The guy looked at the photo and shook his head. We talked for a while, and I told him I was an illegal and bought a social security number and driver's license from a guy in Denver. He got really angry, but the idiot didn't even ask to see my papers. 20 minutes later, he got in his car and drove away. You guys are a good team. It's fun working with you. Leroy was still giggling as he returned to his office. It was getting colder. Most of the work now consisted of maintenance rather than repairs. There was no need to rush, and we could work at a comfortable pace. The nights were getting longer and colder. The days were gray and dreary. I liked it. Jorge was drinking more and more. That weekend, I had a chance to take a break. When Jorge and I sat down at the Four Corners Truck Diner, I noticed a cell phone on the seat. Normally, I would have just given it to the waitress and moved on, but today I had a different idea. I asked Jorge to order for me and went outside. I decided to call Sarah first. Dad, what the hell are you doing in Tulsa? I thought I'd call and let you know everything's okay. That's great. We were worried. Mom's going crazy. What's this all about? Everyone says you've lost your mind? What did your mom tell you? Just that you were angry at her for working, and when she refused to quit, you went crazy and wrecked her car and her boss's car. That's it? That's all she told you? Yeah. After she posted bail, she said you just disappeared. She hired a detective, but he couldn't find you. I think it cost her a lot of money. When you see her, ask her to tell you more. She owes you that. She's not telling you the whole truth. What are you doing in Tulsa? It says Tulsa on the screen. I'm not in Tulsa, but I think the guy who gave me the phone is from there. When you talk to Jordan, tell him everything's okay. How's your mom? You mean besides the fact that she's angry and bitter? She lost her house because you didn't show up in court, and she had to move into a trailer by the highway. The insurance company refused to pay for the damage to the car, so she had to buy a car from a dealership that offered installment payments. The BMW finance company is still demanding payment for the car. She's working at Waffle House near the airport and has to take extra shifts to make ends meet. Every time I talk to her, she curses you to the 7th generation. Mom's not happy. Well, at least there's a little bit of good news. Dad, you're sick. You're not going to tell me what's going on, are you? Number. Don't tell Mom I called. If you want to know more, ask her. I think I understand. Call me when you can. I love you. I love you too. And I'm sorry I can't come. Bye. I decided I had a few minutes before dinner and called Seymour. Seymour, this is Charlie Terrell. What's going on? Damn, Charlie, you're in serious trouble. The bail company is looking for you. The police are looking for you. Your wife is looking for you. Wow, it's nice to be in such demand, Seymour. How's the divorce going? Everything's settled. Sharon was a little grumpy, but she signed all the papers in the end. If there are no complications, it will be final in 3 weeks. By the way, the house isn't yours anymore. Yes, I heard. Just out of curiosity, how's Glenn Sebastian doing? Mr. Sebastian disappeared, out of the picture. That's another thing that pissed your wife off. I think she was counting on him to help her out a little, and he left town. Apparently, he filed false reports with the insurance and mortgage companies about fire suppression system repairs in his warehouses. The insurance company knew it was arson, and he was the prime suspect, so they refused to pay. 2 people who had goods stored in his warehouses also couldn't get their insurance, and Glenn had to run to save his skin. By the way, I have to report this call to the police, you know. I thought so. What are you going to tell them? That you called me from Tulsa to find out how your divorce was going. Will that work? Yes, Seymour. I'd appreciate it if you didn't tell Sharon. When the divorce is finalized, can you send the documents to my daughter? No problem. Take care, Charlie. Glad you called. When I returned to my seat, the waitress was already setting the table. We hadn't finished eating when a huge truck driver approached us, looking for his cell phone. He was very happy to have his phone back and reluctantly agreed to take $20 when I told him I had made 2 calls. Everyone came out ahead, but I made Jorge pay for breakfast. He needed to stop by for a week's worth of booze before heading home. It started snowing and work slowed down. Leroy didn't mind, and Jorge and I spent more time relaxing. Jorge started drinking even more. I hadn't had a haircut since I left home. My hair was long enough to tie back in a ponytail. I grew a mustache for fun. Every day, Jorge and I became more alike. One day, when he was half drunk, I made him explain why he drank. I was married to a beautiful woman named Marisol. We lived in Waco. I had a good job and a nice house. One day, Marisol came home and found me in bed with her sister. I hated her sister and never understood why I wanted to sleep with her, but I did. Marisol threatened to cut off my manhood if I didn't leave immediately. I loved her, and I've been drinking ever since to numb the pain of my stupidity. I would do anything to change what happened. At least I had an explanation. I wanted him to quit drinking, or at least cut back, but he seemed to be trying to drink himself to death. I kept thinking about Nicolas Cage in that depressing movie. I was surprised he had managed to accomplish so much. My driver's license was about to expire. I didn't know what to do. I guess I could have just gone and gotten a new one, but I was afraid they would notify Pennsylvania and they would find me. Jorge had a South Dakota license that was also about to expire. After endless hours of drunken arguments, we decided that I would go and renew Jorge's license, putting his photo and signature on it. Jorge said he didn't want to drive anymore anyway. We decided that if I took off my glasses and combed my hair, everything would go smoothly. I didn't think about the trouble I could get into if I got caught. By the end of the week, I was Jorge Toledo and had a driver's license to prove it. Jorge said I should start using his social security number too. He wasn't a fugitive from the law, just running from an angry wife who probably wasn't even looking for him. Jorge started drinking even more and couldn't work half the time. Leroy knew what was going on, but chose to turn a blind eye. Finally, about 2 months later, just at the beginning of spring, Jorge died in his sleep. He was only 45 years old. Leroy reported it to the authorities, and we arranged for a cremation, as Jorge had requested. What happened next surprised me deeply. When the coroner arrived, Leroy helped him fill out the necessary paperwork. I tried not to get in the way until they were finished. After the coroner left, Leroy handed me a copy of the death certificate. At the top of the page was the name Charles Raymond Terrell. 3 days later, Leroy and I scattered his ashes in the wind. Since Jorge was not wanted by immigration or the law, all kinds of possibilities opened up for me. Leroy was busy looking for a replacement until we became too busy. I decided it was safe to get a credit card. I couldn't justify buying my own cell phone. Leroy had bought several phones for work to replace the old walkie-talkies, and they had unlimited calling. I traded in my Mazda for a Ford Ranger. It was time to call Sarah before she heard the bad news about my death. Dad, you're in South Dakota. Isn't it great that we have caller ID? Don't tell Mom. No way. I finally got her to admit why you left. I don't have feelings for her anymore. By the way, the divorce papers came last month. You're officially single. Unfortunately, I'm officially dead too. What do you mean? One of the guys at work died and the coroner put my name on the death certificate. You'll probably get a notification soon, so pretend to be surprised and upset, but not too much. You can tell Jordan, but not Mom. Wow, that's really strange. I don't know how you managed it, but congratulations, I guess. No one else should know about this. I hope the police and your mom stop looking for me. I was cremated and my ashes were scattered in the wind, so there's no need for a funeral or ceremony. I guess it's a good thing my grandparents died at this time. I'm sorry I didn't insure you. Don't worry about the insurance. We're fine, and so is Jordan. He just got another promotion and a new assignment. Do you have a new name, or would you rather I not know? Let's just say your father is Mexican-American now and leave it at that. Dad, can Eric and I come visit you? I'm pregnant, and I really want to see you. I know you shouldn't come home, but can we come to you? We have a new Subaru Outback, and Eric really wants to take it for a spin. Let me think about it. I'll call you back next week. I don't see why not, but I don't have anywhere to put you up. I live in a garage. I'm sure there are motels nearby. I'll wait for your call. Don't forget. I found a small motel nearby and let Sarah know. They were supposed to arrive in a week. Leroy still hadn't found a replacement for Jorge. That evening I had breakfast alone again, and it wasn't as pleasant as it had been with my old friend. On the way to the garage, I thought about him and how sad he had been when he died. I didn't like the idea of dying like that, alone. Leroy was waiting for me when I pulled up. He had a smirk on his face, which meant he had a surprise for me. I didn't want to know what it was. You have a visitor. Who could it be? It's a surprise. Your wife. The earth stopped, but not because I was in ecstasy, but because I was afraid of what was about to happen. All my efforts and all my problems had been in vain. That bitch couldn't find me, but she did. Slowly, I walked toward the workshed, and Leroy grinned from ear to ear. What the hell was so funny? I crossed the room and climbed the stairs. Without hesitation, I opened the door and entered. Who the hell are you? Standing in front of me was the most beautiful girl I had ever seen. Long black hair and dark eyes accentuated her Latin features. Although she was in her 30s, her body looked 10 years younger. Her question caught me off guard, and I quickly realized why Leroy had found it so amusing. Marisol had finally found Jorge, the man she had left 2 years ago but apparently couldn't forget. You're not Jorge. Who the hell are you? Why did that bastard send me here and say Jorge would be here soon? I pulled up a chair and offered her a seat. When she sat down, her eyes remained fixed on mine, as if she didn't trust me. Would you like something to drink? Just tell me what's going on. Over the next hour, I tried to explain to Marisol how much Jorge loved her and how sorry he was for what he had done to her. I also had to explain how I came to be using his name and why. There was a little of Jorge's booze left, and we decided to help him finish it. I don't know if we were celebrating Jorge's death or our own misfortune. She stayed the night, and the next day we drove out to an open field where Leroy and I scattered his ashes. Later that day, she went home without getting what she had hoped to get back. She forgave him for what he had done, but she couldn't tell him until I opened the credit card bill. I felt sorry for her loss. In a fairy tale, Marisol and I would have loved each other passionately, but unfortunately, this was real life. Sarah is coming next week. At least I have something to look forward to.